Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Last Light from Grey Fox Games. Again, I'm reviewing Last Light again. I've already covered the prototype before. You can see my coverage, I'll link it down below, but I already reviewed the prototype, and I'm reviewing this game again for a variety of reasons, and that's not something I always do. When it comes to prototypes, usually if I cover it, I won't always cover the final production, unless in some way things have changed, there's a reason. There has to be a reason, and the reasons today are threefold. One, the game has just landed, it's exciting, it's new, it's going to be available to buy at Gen Con a little bit, and then for those, I'm assuming I hope there'll be other ways to get your hands on this. I really hope so, because it's a great game. So it's exciting, it's a new one because of how fast this game is. This is a 4x game that plays in an hour. Because of how fast this game is, I've already been able to get multiple plays of this game in the short time that I've had it since it's arrived. Number two is that since covering the game, since originally covering the prototype, I have played the game multiple times at conventions, and then played it on TTS, and continue to play it now as well. So I've had multiple opportunities to continue to evolve and adjust my tastes and opinions of the game, and my opinion of the game has only gone up with some updates and caveats. And then number three is the production. This is an over-the-top GameFound produced game that is a 4x in space that has a lot of fun little, just giant marbles in space. It's giant marbles in space, and I want to talk about the things I like and don't like about the production. And so to that end, I will go over a brief overview of how it plays, but not a lot has really changed there since I've covered the game, or at least nothing that I've significantly noticed. So I'm going to keep the how to play very short, and then dive into my thoughts, opinions, things that have evolved or changed since covering it last, and just an updated review and score and all those things, and as usual, timestamps to all the sections down below. Last Light is a 4x game. A 4x game that plays, I believe, 2 to 8 players. I don't know the lowest. I don't believe there's a solo mode. I don't recall there being a solo mode, and if there is one, I have not played it. It's a 2 to 8 player game that I have played at 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 players. I have not played it at 6 and 8, and the 6th one, that's the one I'm curious about. We'll talk about that more. But it's a 4x experience that generally plays in an hour, and that might seem hard to believe, but it's a 4x experience that plays in an hour and feels like a 4x experience, which I think is the key point. There are a lot of 4x games that promise you the shorter playtime, and none of them to me hit an hour, and usually they don't feel like 4x when they do so. They might be great games, but they don't often feel like 4x when they do so. Last Light does. Last Light feels like a 4x, and the way it does that is through simultaneous play. You're going to have these hands of cards, and every player is going to choose their card. They're going to go ahead and choose and place their card, revealing at the same time, and then executing on the actions, usually at the same time. It's usually pretty easy to do things at the same time without overly interacting with other players while being aware enough what other players are doing. Someone says, I play Construct, and they go ahead and construct new ships, always place them at their colony base. So if somebody else plays Construct, I have the mental cognizance that you've played Construct, and your ships can only go one places. Now your Extractor, the thing that mines goods from various planets around the board, that can vary, but again, peripheral vision can keep you up to date fairly easily. If I play Mine, Mine is how you go ahead and execute on those Extractors. You're going to start the game with an Extractor on your colony ship over here. You can build more on your colony ship, and you can build them at various planets around the board, and if you say Mine, I know you're walking away with more resources. I don't need to pay that much attention. When you trade, you get to trade up resources in the game. You're going to have 3 different resource types, plus of course light, the way you win the game, and when you trade those different resources around for other things, again, if you say this, I know you've traded, I don't need to heavily be not aware of every single detail. Then we have Research over here, and again, same issue. This is the 4th of 6 cards you can play, and Research is going to allow you to gather new tech cards. I do need to be aware of what you build, because you're going to draw new tech cards, draw 3 and then keep 2 of those, and then build any tech cards, including the one you started the game with, and you can build them onto your ships in different ways, or alternatively there are generic techs that are going to be in play that just help your civilization as a whole, and those, I don't need to be aware of the most of the stuff you've been doing, but it does help if I know that your ships can now bombard me or different things like that. It definitely helps to know the end result of what you did at that point, but again, a quick glance and a quick up-to-date, it means I can go ahead and I can construct while you are doing research, and then we can both take a quick glance. You built those ships and you built that technology, we are good to go. Then we have Refresh and Command. These require a bit more involvement. You see Refresh over here, Refresh is going to be how you gather your cards back into your hand to play them again. When you play Refresh, all these cards come back, and your Refresh stays on the table until all other players have played their Refresh, at which point it will come back, and the board will rotate, and you'll potentially earn light, and again, you need 20 light to win the game, so that's an important part of the game. But more importantly, when you're refreshed, you're going to go ahead and heal all damage from ships. You're going to unexhaust any cards. There are some cards in the game, some techs, some races that will exhaust as you use them, and then you're also going to gain light. You're going to get 1 light for every single planet in this ring over here, 2 light for every planet here, and no light for these outer planets there, which means positioning is key, but you need to have full control. You need to ensure that you are prepared to gain that light, which means if I anticipate that you're ready to play refreshed because you just took control of places, I need to go ahead and try to get my ships there before you play refresh, and before is the key thing. But if I can go ahead and move my ship to wherever you are, and they don't just pop around the board like that, then I will limit the 2 light you will gain there, because you can no longer gain light by a blockaded planet in that sense. So over there, it's going to be very important around the positioning of the board. Even if I don't kill you, just being there is a big deal. Which brings us to command. Now, all the cards have numbers in the order they resolve. The 1, 2, 3, 4 over here don't really matter significantly, but the 5 and the 6 do. You're going to play refresh after everything else, and command after refresh, because command is how you move and attack in the game. Command is the main thing that's going to be done in player order. It's the only time player order actually matters. Everyone who played command in player order going to move all the ships around the board, and ships by default, until you upgrade them, just move one zone, which means it's going to take a few command cards. You start colony ships over here, you're going to start ships by your colony, which means it takes 1, 2, and 3 command card plays to get to the center. Excuse that ship, I just sent flying across the galaxy. And so you need to be mindful of that timing of getting your ship to the center of the galaxy as you go, and then also engaging in combat, where you're going to roll dice. This is where the size of the ship does matter. You will roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, and you have 1, 2, or 3 health, depending on the small, medium, or large ships. And the command is an important part. The problem is refresh triggers first. So if I already have control of a bunch of things, if I already set myself up for success, then I will gain my light before you can move into my zone and blockade me. You have to be on your toes the entire time. You cannot let players who are gathering too much light, you cannot let them set themselves up for success too much. You need to be on top of your game a turn ahead. If you wait too long, they'll already be gaining light. Then, once all players have played the refresh card, which will happen usually at different times, I'll play my refresh, I'll pull stuff back, I'll be executing my next command. Once the 3rd refresh card is played, at the end of the full round, you're going to say, look, all the refresh cards for all the players are played, and we're going to rotate the board. We're going to rotate this board over here by 1 clockwise circle over there. You can see how this lines up over there, just make sure that lines up. And then you're going to rotate this one, again, to another one, so it's 2 sectors the way that works. So these are going to rotate 2 sectors around, which means everything's rotating at different speeds, and then any ships in the middle, let's pretend we have a ship in the middle over here, all ships in the middle will earn a light for whoever has a ship there. So if I have 4 ships in the middle, I gain 4 ships. So trying to get to the middle is important, but so is trying to control the planets, and so is, well, everything else in this game. You're going to go back and forth trying to resolve that sequence. You're going to have your own special race advantages, a whole stack of powers over here from the various species you're going to have in the game, and you're going to be trying to gain as much light. You're going to do so through your special powers if they affect light. You're going to do so by having 4 techs. When you play a tech card, you gain a light. Whenever you kill ships, once you've killed 4 ships, you get to go ahead and return it and gain a light. You can play your trade card to trade those orange resources into light, and then most of the light will usually come from control of the galaxy and then being in the center of the galaxy as the game rotates. That's the how to play. That's most of the details, honestly. You kind of know the highlights of how to play. A few small things we didn't get into, but we're not going to get into every single thing because, like I said already, this is already my second review of the game, and not a lot has changed. What has changed? Well, since reviewing this game, I've played the game at more player counts. I've played the game in the final production phase. I've played the game... No, I think just those 2. I've also played the game over a longer period of time because, like I said already, I reviewed the game and then continued to play it at conventions, on TTS, and now over here. So I've had time, more player counts, and the final production under my belt, and my opinion has changed, mostly for the better, but we will talk about things that are also, well, small concerns of the game. Small concerns, not nothing to really worry about. But with that, let's talk about the game. I like Last Light a lot. And the reason I like Last Light a lot is because of how easy it is to table. It's an incredibly easy game to table. Even setup, the first time you set up the game, it's going to be a little bit of just getting your handle on things. But even the accounting for different player counts, because one of the things about the game is there's going to be a different setup for different player counts. Each page in the rulebook has its own configuration. But honestly, like, this is a game that my preferred player count of this game generally is 3 and 4, and 3 and 4 players, I mostly have the setup down mentally. I just kind of glance at the rulebook, make sure a few things are on. That first time will take you a bit more time. You'll be referencing the rulebook. I probably should show it to you over here. We're going to reference the rulebook. You're going to be looking at these various pages over here. This is actually the 5-6 player rulebook over here. But you're going to be looking at all these different iconographies, referencing over here. We got that planet there. We got these planets there. We have these deep space exploration tokens over there, which is where these tokens you go ahead and flip over and get a benefit. That's a tech card over there. So you have all these different things you're going to be looking at, and it does take a little bit to mentally figure it out the first time, but it gets easier and easier the more you do it, especially if you're playing it at those same player counts. But setup, once you're down in this game, if you're setting this up on your own, it could be like a 7, maybe 10-minute setup, and then especially if you're doing it with others and tearing it down with others and all that, that will definitely reduce that even further. So it's a quick game to set up, to get ready to play, and it plays in under an hour almost every single time, or around an hour almost every single time. I haven't timed each and every one of my games, but it's one of those things I've kind of become mentally aware of, and it's usually a game that's around 40 minutes to an hour almost consistently. I know that the 7-player game, I played one 7-player game, I believe that came in at around an hour and 15 minutes, so like really long for a 7-player 4x game. But overall, the game plays fast while giving you a 4x experience. Now, there are some areas where it feels a bit like a compromise, and there's some small complaints around how the game tends to play out, or at least with the groups I play it with, but overall, it gives you that fast-paced feel. You are playing the game, you're trying to figure out what exact strategy do I go for. Do I immediately chart a pathway towards the center of the galaxy to start gaining light and just control of those planets, because that's incredibly key. But if I build ships first, then I can start charting more pathways to the center of the galaxy. So maybe I build ships first. Maybe I go with a build, refresh, build, and start charting a course forward. Maybe that's the most efficient way forward. Although maybe I just do build and then, chart forward, command, build, command, refresh, build, command. But meanwhile, I'm ignoring tech. So maybe I just go tech, then build an extractor too, and then mine. Maybe I should do that, because if I build, mine, and command, and then refresh, I can get an additional mine out, and then maybe I don't rush to the center of the galaxy as fast, but I'm starting to get that pathway of the economy of my game up faster, and that's incredibly important. If I could have 3 extractors in the game while you're running through space, sure, you'll be at the center of the galaxy first, but I'll be there soon and with a larger fleet. And so that happens in this game. You have these simple, this is 6 cards, that's all there is 6 cards. But then the sequence of the way you play those cards, the way you execute on those actions, results in a game that is very easy to understand, very easy to play through. It's easy to teach people to this game, it gets up and running very quickly, and it plays in an hour. People's first games play in an hour. You can see there's a recorded playthrough on the channel that I did, and for the other 2 people at the table, it was their first game, and it played in less than an hour to get that game played. That is a consistent experience of Last Light. It is a quick playing game. It's not a filler, because, it's an hour, it's not a filler, but it is if you want strategy in an accessible, manageable, and reliable time frame, Last Light delivers on that. And it makes you feel cool while you're doing so. There are many pathways towards victory. There are many pathways for how you execute. That's I kind of touched upon the different sequencing of the way you play cards, the way you try to engage in the battles of the space battles and space galaxy and all that, because you will have players who generate light, and those players might be targeted. So maybe you lay back a bit, let other players duke it out a bit, and then sweep in with your fleet once the remains are done. There's so many ways to pursue this game. Tech is there's a huge stack of these tech cards over here. It's just a giant stack. That's what it is. This is a giant stack of tech cards that gives you a lot of variability to the way your ships are going to operate, the way your ships can avoid death, the way your ships can warp drive across the galaxy, roll more dice, have more health, have more speed. Those things are incredibly important. If you have a ship that moves at 2 speed, the amount of planets you can start sweeping up, you can just try to avoid the center and ignore this. This whole tension in the galaxy, because the board's constantly rotating, it keeps everything in play. This player over here is very quickly going to be dealing with these players because of the rotation of the board. But if you have 2 movement on your ships, you can sweep around, swoop up all those peripheral galaxies, those planets that are worth only 1 light apiece when you refresh. People aren't fighting as hard over those. Let everyone else duke it out for the center and for the light when the galaxy turns. You can sweep around the board and gain everything else, get your extractors in play on everyone else's side planets, force them to focus on areas that they can't afford to because they don't have your maneuverability. And so tech is a key part of the puzzle. Everything in this game just operates well. Oh, and these over here, I love these. I wish there was a drop more almost, and I almost want to start implementing a variant where you have 2 of these in play at any given time, although that might break the game. I don't know. I might try it. It's a fun thing. These are going to be your species over here. You're going to have 2 of these pieces handed to you at the beginning of the game, and you're going to choose these, and these are going to give you different ways that you're stronger. Xenolithin over here. You may exhaust this card before rolling combat dice to roll 1 additional combat dice, which honestly doesn't seem that cool to me. I'm sure it's very powerful at the right times, the right moments, because there are times where rolling an additional die is a big deal, but I'm not as impressed by that one. We have Jotnari. You start the game with a large ship instead of a small ship. That is a big deal right there. Sure, it's only a starting power, but starting with one of those big whoppers in play when everyone else is dancing around with these tiny things that are going to be squishy beyond belief, that is going to give you a large incentive to sweep across the galaxy and take people out, making you a threat before you have any right to be. But then once the game gets going, they have their powers and yours are gone. We have ArcNet. If you are blockading any enemy constructs, gain a light when that enemy refreshes, then exhaust this card. ArcNet is big. You combine ArcNet with the right tech powers over there, that's going to totally change the way you approach the game, and that's the key about these. A lot of these totally change the way you approach the game, and there's a large stack of these to go through, and then if you do try to go something crazy, like, hey, give everyone 3 cards and you pick 2, that will also change the way you approach the game further and giving you more fun, cool things to do in the game. This game is about doing fun, cool things and getting a 4x experience, all while doing so in an hour, and it does so incredibly well. It works incredibly well at 2 players. It works incredibly well at 3 and 4 players. 3 and 4 is my personal favorite player counts. It works incredibly well at 5 players. I have not played it at 6 players, and I am curious on 6, because for me, 7 was a little too chaotic. 7 is a game I've only played once, but at 7 players, to me, this was a game that, yes, it was still fun. It was still fine, but I would never seek a 7-player game out again. Would I be willing to do it? 100% yes. Would I seek it out? No, I don't think so. Did it play in an hour and 15 minutes? Yes. Did I have a good understanding of what everyone was doing? No, it was a bit too chaotic. To me, 7 players was a bit too chaotic. It's just the amount of stuff happening on the board. That peripheral vision that kind of keeps the game moving at 3, 4, and 2 and players, all that, it works well, and for me it has worked well up to 5 players. I don't know about 6. 6 is an interesting bridge number because 5 has worked for me, albeit a little worse than 4, and 7 was too much. 6, I don't know where to land, and I assume that is something that might get better if you're playing with either with the same players or just more and more over time. But by the time I played with 7 players, I already had a bunch of plays under my belt, and so I knew the game well enough, and I just think 7 was a drop too chaotic for me to try to either understand the changes going on the board all the time, or alternatively to just tap out and just do my own thing, which is great and works, and I had fun, but 7 would not be my go-to player count. It's worth noting the game is the game plays 2 to 4 players in the base box. Again, I think 2 to 4. I don't think this is solo mode. 2 to 4 players in the base box, and then 6 to additional 5 to 8 if you buy the expansion. Which the tricky part there, especially if you are looking to buy the expansion, is right now, at least based on my own experience, the expansion helps me play it at 5. I don't know if the expansion helps me play it at 6, and 7 and 8 I'm just not really going to dive into, so that's where I personally am on player count. This feels like a good time to tangent to the things I don't necessarily love about the game, and there's not a lot that I don't love about the game, but there are some things worth touching upon. First of all, you're going to have the tech deck, and this is something where it might be a player group dependent thing, but I do find that tech isn't as explored as much as I would like when I play through the game. Tech is useful, tech is helpful, tech will make the difference between winning and losing, but often not a ton. The amount of time I see players gaining lots of light from having 4 technologies in play and for building up a repository of 5 or 6 techs in the game, I don't see that happening a ton, and that could be a player group thing about the way you explore the galaxies. I find tech is kind of tangentially explored at the beginning of the game, and then from there players will use the techs they had in those first few rounds of play, and rarely lean into them as much in later rounds, and that's something that's not the end of the world, not by a long shot, but it does mean that when I play the game and I think of all the viable strategies and pathways forward, tech to me seems like the least used from all the actions that are going on at the table as far as your pathway towards that endgame. Additionally, the planet colors, as cool as these all are, you'll see all the planets have different shades of colors. They have little bases in case you can't easily see. So this is a red and green planet, and you can see that on the base and on the planet itself. You have both those options at your disposal. But this whole beautifully colored galaxy of different planet colors is an interesting mechanic that to me feels underutilized. You're going to have in the beginning of the game, you're going to have these cards. You're going to choose a card that's going to say, hey, when you achieve control over a certain number of planets based on the color type that's out there, you'll get that much light. So if you control a bunch of green planets, you'll get a bunch of light, and you control a bunch of blue planets, and it's different numbers of planets for different colors, so it kind of gives you something to go for and gain control. And that's where the color of the planets comes in. Speaking for myself, I find that it feels like such an underused aspect of the planet color. We have all these beautiful planets and all their colors on them, and I kind of wish the color mattered a bit more other than this one mechanic, which may not even be something you even ever do. I've played full games of Last Light where nobody got one of their cards over here, and that means you have an entire color mechanic around something that isn't always necessarily utilized. I would almost want to see planets utilized more. Now, to be fair, I haven't actually gone through all of these. I'd be curious if some of these affected, like, hey, you have some benefit with blue planets. I don't know, but I wish planet color came into play a bit more. That feels like a mechanic that was in the game, but they're not really heavily utilized, and might even be, like, I'm not sure, maybe it's driving there so you have these beautiful planets on the board, but you can do that without having their color matter. You can just have planets on the board, and so it feels like something that kind of matters, but I wish it mattered a drop more if it's going to matter at all. From there, the only real complaints I have are production. This is where we're going to dive into production, where the production is on this game, and at least where it is for me. And that's where, and we'll talk about rulebook as well, because I have small critiques there as well. I'll start by saying that overall, the game looks beautiful on the table. Overall, the game is incredibly well produced. These planets are gorgeous. The general sense of space opera combat over here, the rotating board, all of that works incredibly well as you play through the game. And so overall, no real complaints. And that was 2 rotations, not 1, by the way, so I did that wrong. But either way, as far as you play through that overall sense of what's going on here is great, and there are some things I like better than others, but I do have some small complaints or nitpicks around both the production as well as the rulebook. The rulebook, I find that there are 1 or 2 areas that are not necessarily clear, and I have the benefit of knowing how to play this game already, so I didn't necessarily have a question so much as a, that wasn't necessarily there. There are a few, tokens that aren't necessarily listed in the rulebook, and you have to either assume or go online to validate what they do and how they operate. There's not a big deal. I would say overall the rulebook is short, it's to the point, it gets you up and running fairly quickly, and it does so with overall a very good understanding of how to play the game. But it could have possibly used another page or 2 of just things being a drop more clear, possibly more examples, or some visual things of tokens tokens and whatnot and how those operate. So rulebook is mostly good, but definitely some small nitpicks. Past that, as far as the actual production of other things, the issues I don't like there, there's a few small nitpicks. And again, they are nitpicks. Don't let this take away too much from your experience, but there are things that I wish were better or different or whatever it is. First of all, and I talked about this in my unboxing video to a degree, but a lot of the components just feel light. You have these tokens, you have this light over here, and by the way, the light in the rulebook is depicted as a different token, but we have light over here, we have these space rocks, we have even our spaceships, and all these things, other than the planets, which the planets feel incredibly premium and cool, most of the other tokens feel a little bit on the light side, a little bit, you know, not bad, they look nice, but they're definitely light. And again, I know you're trying to collect light, but it does feel light. I'll say that the 1s and 3s, the 1s and 5s I should say, the 1s and 5s on the light are, especially when you're talking about a pile of tokens. I mean, this is the pile of tokens you have. So you have tokens that look like this on the board, and some of these are going to be 1s, some of these are going to be 5s, but because they're already just white tokens, at a glance, it's not easy to see that that's a 5 and that's a 1. You can do it, but at a glance, it's not so easy, and I've definitely grabbed the wrong token multiple times, only to realize a second later, hey, I have 5 more light than I need, and so that's a small little nitpick. I wish they were either a bigger gap in size or some other difference to indicate whether a token was a 1 or a 5. You have a similar problem with the resources that you're going to have of these over here, because these over here have a few kinds of resources. Let's go ahead and put some into your hand so you can see the problem. We have purples, we have orange, and we have these white ones over here. And when you have these in a pile, it is easy to mix up some of them, specifically these regular ones and the orange ones. It's easy to mix them up at a glance because of how present the gray is. The gray is so present on all the tokens over here that the purple sticks out beautifully. The orange sticks out a little bit, but these over here, especially if they're capturing the light, because the way the light naturally reflects in the room you're in, it can put just a drop of color into those in a way that has them easily confused. It's not a big deal. I can see how the oversight might happen, or not say oversight, but the general aspect of it where, again, these are nice. I really like the token design on these, I'll say that, but because they're coated in a larger sphere of gray around them, so it kind of obfuscates the gray to begin with, and that means every token has gray in it, which makes it easy to kind of mix up, especially the orange and the gray. Not the end of the world, but again, a small little thing there. I'll say that if you have the 5 to 8 player expansion, there are different sculpts for different ships over here, but there's only 4 unique sculpts, which means that there's 4 colors in the base game, 4 colors in the expansion, and the 2 colors that share the sculpt in the base game versus expansion are orange and yellow, which is a small production quirk. It means that if you have orange and yellow ships on the board, you're that much more likely to confuse them. I haven't actually played a game with both orange and yellow together for that reason, and I think it would be fine, but if you're trying to play an 8-player experience, that is something that might be an issue. I don't know for sure. You'd have to give it a shot to see. Past that, overall, oh, and the last thing, my last thing, which is possibly my worst offending complaint, I almost forgot this, is these extractors. The extractors feel so tiny. I do not like these extractors one bit. These are the things that go onto planets or on your colony ship to mine, and they are tiny. They are tiny, they feel light, they don't really take up board space or presence, they don't feel, for a game that is this premium, and the game is premium, the reason I have these complaints at all is because the game is a premium game, a premium experience, and it feels like it for the most part. But that makes some of the areas where it doesn't feel a drop not as much. And those extractors over here, these are a little on the smaller side and a little bit just, they don't have a heft that feels satisfying. It reminds me of Spirit Island. Spirit Island, I've always had complaints around the nature of the colonizers and the way their little tokens are, and this feels like that. I want an upgrade for them. The regular ships are fine. They're not the best, not the worst, but these extractors in particular, I wish they had more heft to them. Past that, I like this game a lot. Like a lot. This game is fantastic. This game, I've been introducing this to various members of my game group one at a time since I've gotten it. During the prototype phase, I don't think I ever played with any of my game group back then. That's when I have different people I play games with, but my casual game group that's just there for playing games and doesn't do all the work stuff of content creation with me, not as much. I usually only introduce them to games that I already know that I like, because that just saves them time and makes sure that they're willing to spend time playing games with me. But this game has been an absolute hit with everyone I've introduced it to. And not just a hit, but like a degree of excitement, a degree of playing the game being like, that was so much fun, and that was so quick, and we could do that again, and we can do this whenever we want. We could just play like 3 games of Last Light instead of that longer game that is good, but it's not worth 3 games of Last Light. This is a game that satisfies. It satisfies me. It satisfies people in the game group. It is easy to teach. It is easy to play. It is easy to play again and again and again. It is just a good experience. I believe when I rated this last time, way back when I covered the prototype, I gave it a 4 out of 5. And since then, my score has already improved to a 4.5 out of 5. I think the small things that really take it back for me is like there's a decent amount of setup and tear down a little bit, but nothing crazy there. But the small degrees of production issues hold it back a drop. The nature of what the game is, because it's more condensed, does mean that there's not the level of of strategic options that you might have in a game of Twilight Imperium. It's just to expect it. This is not Twilight Imperium, and it means that some aspects of what you do are repetitive, and the techs, which are the thing that would break that up the most, I personally find aren't dived into as much, and I'm curious to see. I almost want to spend my next game just going full on tech and seeing how far I can push that while still being competitive in the game to see where that takes me. But overall, Last Light is fantastic. To me, it is a 4.5 out of 5, primarily because of the experience it gives, the playtime it gives it in, the degree, the player count that it accommodates. It is just a good game. I highly recommend this game. If you're looking for a 4X experience, if you're looking for a quick playing 4X experience, if you're looking for a game that accommodates 2 players as well as it accommodates 5 players, this is a game that will deliver that. I highly recommend Last Light from Roy Canada from Grey Fox Games as an excellent game that is, it's worth checking out. Whether or not it's in your collection, different conversation. Also depends on the retail options. This is the deluxe Kickstarter option, the deluxe GameFound option, and I don't know what the retail options will or won't be and price points around those things. And you have to take those things into account when deciding what goes into your collection. But it's a game that's definitely worth trying out and seeing if it's a fit for you for all the reasons that it's a fit for me. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. Hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.